All right, well, we will go ahead and get started then. Welcome, everyone, on behalf of OADN and Unbound Medicine. We're pleased to have you join us today for Unpacking AI Ethics, a panel discussion on navigating the future for nurse educators. This discussion is facilitated by the OADN Simulation Committee. The OADN Simulation Committee consists of nursing education simulationists who review virtual simulation products for their alignment with the healthcare simulation standards of best practice. The reviews are offered at no cost via an online database hosted by our partners at Unbound Medicine. As you're all aware, artificial intelligence continues to expand and evolve in many settings, including in our everyday lives and in our academic practices. Any new technological advancements has ethical considerations. However, AI inherently has unique ethical considerations, especially when we consider confidentiality, academic integrity, and ethical standards related to nursing practice. Today, our objectives are to examine those ethical implications of using generative AI in nursing education, including issues related to confidentiality, academic integrity, and professional standards. We'll explore strategies to prevent unauthorized use of AI by students and faculty, and to uphold academic integrity in clinical and academic settings. We'll also discuss best practices for incorporating AI into our academic practices. To introduce myself, my name is Janeen Berndt, and I'm the Senior Director of Clinical Innovation and Integration at Galen College of Nursing. I've had the pleasure of co-chairing the OADN Simulation Committee, and together with my colleague Teresa, I will be serving as the moderator today. And so now I will hand it off to Teresa for some more introductions.
Hi, I'm Teresa Cooney. I am an associate professor at Howard Community College in Columbia, Maryland, and I teach with the students theory as well as simulation, specialty being pediatrics and OB. I'd like to reiterate that all the panel here, we are all members of the OADN Simulation Committee. And first, I'd like to introduce to you all Elizabeth Robinson. She is a certified healthcare simulation educator advanced with the Society for Simulation in Healthcare, as well as a certified nurse educator with the National League for Nursing. She is now an independent consultant working with nursing programs both stateside and internationally. She has presented in small workshop on using generative AI in nursing curriculum, specifically focusing on using it to build case studies for interactive classroom activities. She has also worked with an international group incorporating generative AI to build simulation scenarios. She's created a podcast called Dr. Liz. You can find it on Podbean, generated by AI for nurse educators, with deep dive discussions to include AI articles from peer-reviewed nursing journals. Welcome, Dr. Robinson. Courtney McNulty. She is our content solution manager at Unbound Medicine, and she's here to she focuses on integrating generative AI into nursing education. Welcome, Courtney. Corinne Harold. She's working at Community College of Nursing as a simulation coordinator for the program and holds certification as a certified healthcare simulation educator and has over 11 years of experience in simulation. She currently utilizes and creates all of the AI-assisted tools for their simulation and provides educational and support to the faculty. Welcome, Dr. Harold. Tammy Schwab. She is a certified healthcare simulation educator with the Society of Simulation in Healthcare and National League for Nursing simulation leader. She's a professor and a simulation director at Carroll Community College in Westminster, Maryland. In this role, she is a member of the college-wide AI task force and has presented on AI during college-wide faculty development meetings. She is currently developing a series of 1-hour advising sessions for her undergraduate nursing students on the use of AI tools for each level of Bloom's taxonomy to effectively study more efficiently and to learn course content. Welcome, Dr. Schwab. So now I'm going to take a moment, and we sent a poll out to those of you who registered, and we kind of wanted to get a feel for what direction to take for this webinar. And it was interesting for us. 35% of the people who filled out the survey said that they have used generative AI in some portion. 44% do not feel comfortable integrating AI into teaching. And then about 21% were not sure if students were implementing generative AI in their education. We asked, how would you rate your knowledge of generative AI? And 27% said they're not comfortable and they consider themselves a beginner. Then we asked, how do you currently learn about AI technology? 69% said colleagues, right? And then 63% said through webinars. So those are pretty high statistics. Then we asked a question about what concerns or questions do you have about AI in nursing education? 76% said ethical considerations, which we're taking a deep dive in today. 65% said quality and reliability of AI tools. And then 31% said impact on student knowledge, which I think that's interesting. Then we asked, what measures are you personally taking to ensure the ethical use of AI? 63% polled said they're demonstrating ethical behavior. 54% said educating about potential biases. And then our last question was, how many have developed a shared AI ethics policy? And 41% said that they've implemented something within their institution. So let's go ahead and start the seminar. Janeen, would you take it, please?
Absolutely. So before we get started with this discussion, we wanted to make it clear that although we are expert nurse educators and expert simulationists, we are not AI experts. We have robust experience across a variety of practices. We're education and simulation and nursing education experts, and we're here to share our experience with AI and our thoughts on its use. You'll likely hear us mention some specific AI products, but we want to be sure that you're aware that this is not an endorsement of any AI product or platform. This is the next in a series of conversations that we plan to have about the use of AI in nursing education. We'll have some more information about our next webinar at the end of this one. We would also ask that you hold questions until the end or put them in the chat, and then we'll answer them at the end. In fact, at the end, you may have more questions than answers, and that's okay. We're here to stir your thoughts, engage your creativity, and trigger your imagination for the use of AI. If we don't have time to get to all of your questions, we will have a subsequent webinar and probably more after that. We will also note them and cover them in those webinars in the future, in workshops, on our VSR website, and possibly by email. Teresa?
So let's go ahead and start the first 10 minutes of our conversation by having our panel discuss considerations regarding academic integrity and the potential impact on nursing education based upon their experience. Corinne, let's start the conversation with you, please.
Yes, thank you. Welcome. So one of the biggest challenges that we tend to see and that we hear a lot of when we start talking about AI is the question of plagiarism. The risk for where does that content come from? What are the students doing it? What are we doing with it? And one of the biggest things that we can really look back at is that as a base for everything, we have to remember to cite our sources and being aware of where that information is coming from. Transparency is probably one of the most important things we can do in the use of these tools, whether it's just creating a video that you're using for a case study that you put all the information into, or whether we're having, say, ChatGPT give us a whole scenario. APA guidelines now actually have some very clear guidelines for us on citing AI usage in some of these different sources. So that's one big help. The other thing is our responsibility in being able to look at where the AI pieces are pulling from in those guidelines. So making sure that they are from those reliable sources. And we're going to go further into some of this as we continue our discussions later today. So to start off that, I would like to turn this over to Liz on academic integrity with AI.
Thank you, Corinne. So when considering academic integrity, one of our toughest roles as a faculty member is to impart on our adult learners the importance of owning their work. AI can be an assistant, but it should not be the main designer. How we impart this may be different depending on the learner. I found in our associate degree program, there was such a range of learner ages. How I discuss with a learner in their 20s may be different from a learner in their 40s, especially when it came to academic integrity. This process has not changed because of AI. We still want the individuals to own their work. As a profession, we tout the importance of how the public rates us as the most trusted profession, and building the importance of this trust starts before those learners enter the workforce. We also don't want to replace the opportunity to critically think by letting AI do it for us. We will talk more later on the importance of role modeling, and you could see with the question polling, there was a pretty large percentage in which role modeling was a theme. But consider how you can create activities that support critical thinking and may still use AI tools within this process. I ran into an article that was a teaching tip, and it reminded me of an AI tool I had been exploring when it first came out. This tool allowed me to create the podcast that Teresa mentioned in my intro, but one was created as a preparation activity for a simulation event that was intended to engage the listener to think about the disease process in caring for a simulated client. Where you have an opportunity to introduce reflection and critical thought, this is a good balance in using AI to stimulate, not replace critical thinking. Tammy will address some considerations with AI detection tools.
Thanks, Liz. As a committee, we've looked at a lot of articles. So we've done a pretty extensive literature review on AI, and there is really no indication at this time that there's a foolproof AI detector. We really encourage faculty to find out what software or system your institution's using, and you should check to see if if your plagiarism detector has an AI detection aspect to it. Have reliability tests been conducted so that you can trust that system? Does your institution have a threshold for your AI detection percentages like we do for plagiarism, let's say? The literature that we've reviewed really seems to focus on strategies for this that surround having a conversation with students to determine if AI was used inappropriately. In my mind, that could be really challenging because especially for institutions that have a lot of students, it may not be the most feasible option. But right now, that may be our only option.
That is really good stuff, Tammy. I wonder, let's spend the next few minutes addressing professional standards and accountability, especially related to AI in nursing education. And so, Tammy, I would love to hear your thoughts on that to get us going for this next section.
Okay, thanks, Janeen. I think we have a real responsibility to provide education and clear guidelines on use of AI to both faculty and students because this is such new technology. Institutions really have to work to make statements or policies to guide practice when using AI, and they might include things like evaluating your AI outputs for relevance, for accuracy, and for bias, which we know exists. It would also include avoiding inputting information that's private, that's copyrighted into the system. And these are issues, ethical issues that faculty and students just may not know, be aware of without that education and explanation. So I think with proper knowledge, we can really avoid most of the ethical issues, if not all. The ANA put out a position statement in 2022 on use of AI, which I think is really helpful. And this is something free online that you can Google. And it really has some good language. So I actually wrote down a specific language because I like the way it's worded. And it specifically states that AI does not replace a nurse's decision-making, judgment, critical thinking, or assessment skills. And it should instead augment, support, and streamline expert clinical practice. I really like the use of those three verbs because I think it's a good good use of how, a description of how we should really use AI in our practice.
And I'm going to add on to what Tammy just stated about the ANA position statement. If you think about when it was written in 2022, that was just at the height of when we saw OpenAI, generative OpenAI, come to fold. And so it was very timely. The article is entitled The Ethical Use of AI in Nursing Practice. And though it seemed to be geared to the clinician, to the practicing nurse, it really did provide a good guidance to nurse faculty. That guidance highlights the importance of using AI as an adjunct and not a replacement, as Tammy mentioned. The guidance addresses the importance for nurses to contribute to AI governance frameworks, research, and policy. So if you are not involved in your institution's crafting of that AI policy, it really behooves you to engage with policymaking at your institutional level. If you're involved in research within your institution, what does your research, your IRB process, how does that address use of AI? So really getting involved helps you identify where the gaps may be. The updated Code of Ethics for Nurses, which was just released in 2025, you may have had an opportunity to look at it in draft form, but now it's available online in hard copy. It also discusses the importance of nurses to be competent with emerging technology tools. And if you think about it, sometimes we don't think of AI as an emerging technology tool, but that's what it is. And it's evolving very quickly. With nurse educators should ensure that curriculum includes teaching our learners to critically evaluate technologies for equity, transparency, and patient safety. And you can see the theme here in terms of that ethical balance, that importance of recognizing bias in output and how we are using AI to share with our learners about that equitable, transparent process. We can't do this unless, as a faculty member, we are comfortable ourselves in using these tools. With any emerging tool data, privacy is a concern. So Courtney will now discuss these concerns.
Thank you, Liz. I think what I want to start off by saying is the good news is these are all things that you are already dealing with, things that you are well aware of in education and in particular nursing medical education. FERPA, HIPAA, internal policies are all things that you are dealing with as a faculty member as you deal with any emerging technologies. I might be dating myself a bit by going back to when camera phones first came out and when smartphones were developed, but think about how you needed to adapt and help students understand you cannot take a picture of patient information, a patient chart, and text that to somebody and share it with someone in your class or outside of your floor. You still need to be educated on the appropriate way to handle that information. And generative AI is very much the same. If you would not take a student's portfolio and share it with a colleague because that could violate FERPA, you would not put that information into generative AI. What you can use generative AI for is a broad scope of, this is a student that I have that's struggling with X, Y, and Z. Help me with crafting a customized learning plan for a student that fits this profile versus being particular and detailed about a student. The same goes with HIPAA. You can be very general and craft your prompt that it could possibly fit a whole slew of patients without getting detailed into that particular patient. And as Liz mentioned with the academic integrity, generative AI is just going to be another component of that, of making sure that students are educated onto the ways to best handle inputting information using generative AI. And this is all focused right now. We're talking about FERPA and HIPAA, internal policies. But then, as Tammy mentioned, there does come that copyright, that proprietary information. You can't, for instance, have a student say, oh, well, I took this textbook I found online in PDF and I created an app for it. That's a violation of proprietary information and copyright infringement. So helping them understand that if you have a resource you're using and they have their own AI, that AI is what you want to use to get the information from that resource. Because typically speaking, the people working for that company, for that resource, the AI is going to be tailored through an API. I know that sounds very technical, but what that means is that company has an agreement with the particular model that they are using that the information in that resource won't be used to train the model. So it's not going to then go out into the AI stratosphere and risk proprietary information being leaked. So knowing what is the appropriate use of a resource that includes AI versus just going to a model such as ChatGPT or Claude on my own, then again goes back into that academic integrity and ethical use. So things that students in nursing are very much inundated with as they first begin the program, because it is so important to the field that you are navigating. So having generative AI just be another form of the emerging technology and something that is going to be, make sure you're keeping true to yourself and to your own academic integrity to make sure that faculty, students alike are understanding the implications of using information inappropriately as you would in any instance with FERPA, HIPAA, or internal policies. And I think that we could spend much more time on all of these topics we've discussed, but we have so much to cover. So I know Teresa is going to lead us kind of into that next segue of where we'll continue the conversation.
Thank you, Courtney. You've given us a lot to think about so far, for sure. So let's shift some gears and let's start talking and discussing about how to prevent unauthorized AI use and how to uphold academic integrity. Let's start with Corinne. How do you define unauthorized or misuse of AI in education?
Yeah, thank you. That's actually one of the conversations that came up for us, particularly in our program with the faculty in our last semester. So AI is getting bigger. We are seeing it used more and more. But what we've discovered really is that without an actual policy or a statement that literally tells the student and the faculty what they're allowed to use or not use, we're more leaning on misuse. Example, we had an instructor who pulled up a assignment. So they had an assignment that the students were supposed to create some kind of like infographic, a picture to describe a set of disease processes and what they would do with it. The picture that she saw as their submission was almost too good and also had different languaging, and there was just different things about it. Something was like, I don't know what this is. So what we tend to find is that we're pulling the students in and asking them. And that's actually how we're finding out that they're using AI. So the student owned up to the fact that they completely used AI on the whole thing, not just the prompt, but to actually create the item. So we're having these discussions with them about use and what they can use the AI for, and including those in our assignment instructions moving forward as well. Other things that we've thought about and that we've had a lot of discussion on are not just the AI inclusion, but the AI being included in things that we have to watch out for as faculty that we're actually not 100% sure exactly how we're going to manage that. So I was in the Sunglass Hut a couple weekends ago, and they have the meta glasses, right? They have the AI in the glasses. And when we get into exams, you can put your prescription in them. So they're prescription glasses. So do we have to start considering that? And how do we manage that? We don't really have answers for that yet, but these are things we started thinking about. They have the pens now that have them. So there's all these different technologies that have the AI included. So lots of questions and things, but the biggest thing that we've identified is really just being very clear in all of those expectations ahead of time, so that it's not the student coming in to the exam with those glasses and it's the first time they've heard, hey, you can't use those ones because I can see the camera. I know you're not turning it on, but I can't have it on. I need you to get your lower tech glasses. So just different things like that. So things to consider. And Liz actually had a great example of some things that she saw with AI usage as well.
Yeah, I want to caveat a little bit on what Corinne talked about that I didn't think about until yesterday. I had a conversation with the director of the testing center at the college where I worked at. And little did I think about it, but the testing center directors, if you have a testing center in your institution, my goodness, do they stay up to date with all the aspects of what can occur with testing? And I know many of us have testing, we do testing proctoring within our own classrooms, but think about engaging with your professionals in the testing center to see what they are doing regarding AI use or how AI could be compromised. And she started going off into the discussion as well about online testing. So more to come on that. As we know, the National Council of State Board of Nursing is considering remote testing for NCLEX in the future. So I'd be interested in staying on top of that as well. So the human component of using AI is just as important for faculty as it is for anybody using it. Depending on how the AI model is trained, inaccurate or biased information may be part of the output. A recent example that happened to me occurred when I had several data sheets. I was trying to put together a presentation. Although I fed it specific information into the tool as an attachment, the output was not factual. It wasn't based on the correct data. Fortunately, the data sheets were not volume. When I realized this, I prompted the tool to elaborate on how this output was determined and pointed out the discrepancy. I felt like I was just talking to a person that had given me information incorrectly and say, you know, what you just gave me was not correct. And that's pretty much how I converse with AI. When the data was rechecked based on my comments to the with a prompt, the output indeed recognized the error, which was good news. And it let me know that it pulled the original output from generalizations that it had formed on another piece of data provided. So it was misrepresenting the data, and I had to correct that. And that's important to know because that helps retrain the model to what it needs to correctly output. So treat it somewhat like a human in the sense that you're trying to correct what the model has been previously fed. This can occur with any AI generated output. It looks so real, but then when you check it for accuracy and biases, it may be subtle, but you know, that's what we have to do with any output. We may think it's a good piece of information. Even those tools that may be internal to universities, you still want to do what I call the output check. You just don't want to say 100% this is accurate. Even if you have done your own training of the model, you still want to do that check because it still may pull in some information that is not correct and be part of your output. So for those novice educators, if you're using AI to create assessment products, whether you are using it for formative or summative assessment, it's also important to ensure that that assessment output aligns with your objectives outlined for that content and check again for completeness and accuracy, especially if it's going to count to a student grade. I know it's so easy to say, well, I have to come up with, 10 questions, or, I had a breach of the exam and now I have to redo the exam. Let me let AI do it for me. It may be a nice shortcut, but if you don't use those examination rules to make sure that those questions are accurate for what you intend those questions to be, as well as the output, you may create more of a problem than you saved with having a shortcut in creating assessment. We had one faculty that I heard that created a great interactive class activity for students, and they called it, "Are you smarter than AI?" Content was generated, practice questions were generated, and the students were asked to pick up errors, if any, based on their class resources. What a great way to guide students and see the opportunity of really looking at using AI, and that is an emerging tool, and look at ways to identify that the output may look like it's correct, but it isn't, based on the resources that they have. I find I gravitate to specific tools depending on the task at hand. I have become more comfortable in using these tools, recognizing that using them allows me to know how best to structure my prompts for the output I'm trying to achieve. I continue to refine my skills, and that's important to build trust in that tool, because tools constantly evolve. I just saw that there's an update to Claude, there's an update to ChatGPT. These tools are constantly evolving. So there are many out there. The key is trying before you invest, especially if you're looking at paid tools. But seek what your institution may provide in terms of access or acceptable use for your program. You may do something outside of your college or university setting, but look at, if you're doing something for your program, what does your college or institution provide you for access? Our local community college recently banned the use of tools on the college system, except Microsoft approved tools like Copilot. So I always say, look at what's available and try to work there first to have your comfort level before you seek out other tools. And we're going to pass it on to Janeen.
Yes.
I could talk about this for days, Janeen.
Yeah, absolutely. You're good. So it's all very, very important considerations. And actually, several of the things that you talked about, Liz, are also coming up in the chat. It's so important for us to be judicious in our own use of AI, especially so that we can model ethical use for our students. So in response to that, and also to some of the discussions that are happening in the chat and in the Q&A, we're going to spend the next few minutes talking about ethical use of AI, especially around policy. And Tammy, I'm going to ask if you would please kick off that discussion.
Okay, thanks, Janeen. Yeah, so my college right now is working on a college-wide policy. We don't have one yet, which I think was the response of a lot of people in our survey. So that's being developed through our AI task force. So if your college doesn't have an AI task force, maybe you can start one. It still would be a broad policy because each kind of department in our college has different needs. And so they don't want to create something that departments might consider overburdensome. The only real statement they've put out in the past couple of years since AI started being used was that they really wanted us to stick to Microsoft Copilot because they felt that was safer. We use Microsoft products. I think it's really important for educators to kind of begin these discussions now at your institutions. Look at the current literature and the guidance that's out there, even though it's still limited and it's evolving, but it will be a starting point for you to begin your discussions and consider the relevant issues to think about. Our nursing department has we're working on it right now, but we've kind of thrown together a position statement of sorts to guide students until our next handbook update's completed. And my goal anyway, as we begin these discussions, is having something we can tell them to guide them now to close out the spring semester, and then something that'll be placed in the handbook and in our syllabi for the fall. We're still discussing that as a faculty group, so it's not completely been, we're hoping to communicate it to them in the next couple of weeks, but it includes things we've kind of talked about in this group already. Some broad concepts from the ANA position statement, some examples of appropriate versus inappropriate use. So we want to give them those examples so that they kind of clearly know, what we expect of them. I think the other thing to consider is how AI are using faculty, and if that's equally appropriate and well considered. So it's not just for the students, it's for the faculty as well. So, we know many faculty are using, just as one example anyway, many faculty are using AI to create NCLEX test questions. I mean, we know that's probably one of the most time-consuming things that we do. And it can be really difficult, especially for our new educators. And with the shortage, many of us have a lot of novice educators. So they're probably leaning into AI just to make their work a little bit less overwhelming. But if the faculty aren't experienced in those exam rules, or in creating NCLEX questions, they may not be able to fully vet the outputs that they get from AI. So, one example would be if you don't already have a test review committee or a team that reviews your exam before you turn it out to students, you should consider that and really think about vetting your test questions. Any test question should be vetted, but certainly those that have been AI generated. And I think, Liz kind of touched on that before when she spoke.
Yeah, so how can we educate our students on appropriate versus inappropriate use? I briefly discussed this in creating a class activity and the concept of role modeling. As a profession, nurses are constantly reminded of that importance of modeling appropriate behaviors. As an instructor, if you are using AI to assist with creating items for clinical, simulation, or classroom, be transparent with your learners that AI assisted with that development. I think we have to share with our learners that we too are using AI for our work. And that we are making sure when we're using it that we have that human aspect within that process of ensuring the accuracy of our output. So anytime I use AI for any kind of presentation, I say that up front. In fact, as a group, we used AI to help craft the outline initially of what we were going to talk about in objectives. And then everybody added their human aspect into the evolving outline for this webinar. As AI technology is evolving, it's important to continue your personal growth. And we can see by the attendance today, this is a topic that individuals really want and want to grow with on how best to do that. I think we'd like to see more in the literature on best practices in using artificial intelligence in nursing education. So, your personal growth helps with that process as well. Just being in attendance to this webinar shows that you're interested in improving how best to use it in higher education, which is so important for the job that you are doing. Corinne, your thoughts?
Yeah, so we've talked about a lot of things with the considerations, the ethics behind it, but most of you are probably also questioning, how are we using it? So having fun with AI and using it as a adjunct to us and being that learning tool is something that I've tried to kind of embrace with a lot of this AI components in several different ways. One is a video. So HeyGen is one particular chatbot use, or not chatbot, but it's a AI product that I've used to use a photo that was generated by the avatar that then speaks and does the script that I've inputted. So we're including those kinds of videos as the nurse giving report or the patient giving a quick information about them within some of our different assignments and activities to make the activity a little more interactive. Another fun one that we actually have been really using a lot of are the chatbots, and programming the chatbot to be the patient, and students during the simulation, particularly when we're running long multiple groups at a time with less instructors in that learning environment. So it's just a learning sim day. They're going through the steps. They can type into the chatbot, "Hey, how are you doing today?" And it answers as the patient. "Do you have pain?" "Yes." And it will answer them as if it was the patient. We implemented that in our mental health clinical simulations that we have in our last semester, and the students loved it. I didn't have it on every day, and my instructors now want that for every patient that we have. So that's been a really big one that we've used. We've also been hearing about instructor-generated prompts where you can put it into ChatGPT. So you tell the ChatGPT the patient type that you want, and then the students can ask questions to get their assessment. So there are ways to pull that even into, say, lecture real quick and see what happens, or to have them generate a prompt and use their critical thinking and say, is that information correct? Based off of everything we've learned, does that actually match the type of patient that we asked it to give us? So lots of different ways to include that within our practice.
Thanks, Corinne. Now let's go ahead and talk with Courtney about AI detection and monitoring.
Thank you, Teresa. It's great. I've been seeing the chat come in and a lot of comments about the unreliability of AI monitoring tools. And I think everyone is very much on the same page that they are notoriously unreliable right now. And if you think about it, it's almost an oxymoron. Why would these AI generators want you to know that they want you to use AI? Why would they want to flag anything as AI that would prevent you from using it? So that's actually been one of the reasons some of these larger models have not created their own AI detection tools. There has been thought about perhaps creating something of a watermark where if you just copy and paste the output, there would be a word or a character that would indicate it was copied and pasted, but that's still being floated around. So if you attended our webinar in October or any other seminars, you might have heard something along the lines of when you're trying out these models and trying to get a particular output to turn AI on itself. We recommend doing the exact same thing, trying different models, if you have a test or an essay that a student turned in, taking that and putting it into a model, asking how much of this seems that it was generated by AI, then trying another model, seeing what it comes back with. And of course, always going back to that academic integrity and education and letting students know that this is what we expect, this is what we're working on. I have used this example previously as well, but it's almost like Cliff Notes. So when I was in school, you could read the Cliff Notes, and the Cliff Notes, sure, would help give you the general gist of a book that you were supposed to read, but it's not going to help you pass an essay exam because you're not comprehending that content. So if a student is using generative AI for an assignment and they're not checking things like the references to see how often they are hallucinated, which is the majority of the time because they are often false links, then they're not going to succeed when it comes to things like clinical simulation, or even practicum when you're going with a faculty member as well, and you can't answer a basic question because you used generative AI and didn't actually understand what you were going to be outputting. So AI detection and monitoring is very much going to improve. It will continue to get better as AI will. But for now, you know your students. If you think something is generated by AI and you want to test that, plug it into a few of these different models, plug it into some of these AI detection tools, see what comes back, and of course have that conversation with the student about going back to that ethical use, academic integrity, and of course the policy that you're creating. There's a Fei Li, who is a professor of computer science at Stanford, and who in the tech world is considered the godmother of AI, has said, craft the policy around the AI that exists. And I think that's true for academic policy regarding AI as well. Craft that policy for what it is that you hope to avoid and want to help educate your students on, and then you'll be more successful at not having to worry about how accurate something like Turnitin or Grammarly is. And I know that's goes into a whole different arena of some of the considerations for ethical concerns on AI surveillance and monitoring. So I'll pass along to Liz for that.
Yeah, so I think as we are beginning to wrap up, I'm also seeing the same kinds of questions in the chat too, in terms of monitoring. And it's interesting because I have monitored myself as well, where I know I 100% wrote something, didn't use AI for the article, 100% wrote it, put it in a detection tool, and it indicated that a certain percentage of it was AI when I knew it wasn't. So when you, as mentioned by Courtney, you need to test out that information in terms of using AI as a monitoring tool. But this is what I feel in my years of working with students before AI existed, where there was concerns about unauthorized use of material that the student turned in that you knew was not the student's work. It is so important to have that conversation with the learner. Have the conversation with what they used and ask for them to be very transparent. If, I know that when you have those conversations with students, it can be both uncomfortable for the student as well as faculty. Anytime we had significant conversations with students, we always brought in another faculty member. So there was an opportunity for, different perspectives in how the student presented that information. And that's not going to change. How you are crafting your assignments, I think, is important. So the student doesn't rely on 100% of AI to turn an assignment because of time management issues. They just don't have time to do the assignment, and so they revert to something that is not the best for that assignment in terms of producing an assignment. So other things too, as we get ready to kind of delve into some of the questions in the chat, is making sure if students are creating anything that is being used in classroom, especially for medical education, patient education, making sure that they understand pretty much what Courtney had said. Is many times when I asked AI to give me the sources, or there's certain AIs that give you sources, I check every single link. Even if there's 10 or 15 or 20 links, I don't let any link go unturned. And sometimes I'm very surprised at what it takes me to. So there is ways that you can make sure that you are ensuring that connection and ethical use of AI without any what I call hard and fast surveillance and monitoring system. And I saw that in the chat. We use Grammarly, now we quit using Grammarly. So you can see the different ones out there. And there's some free ones that are AI generated that says, check to see if this is developed by AI. And I have done the reverse, where I've actually created 100% AI, and then it picked up that was 90% my own. So I just say you can't trust those systems because it's such an evolving tool and technology. There's a lot that goes into building these algorithms for AI detection. So whatever works best for your institution, you have to be comfortable as a nurse educator in using what the institution has garnered for you as acceptable for that process. I'm going to turn it back over to Janeen.
So I think Tammy has a comment before we
I
wrap
just,
up.
I put it in the chat also, but one thing that we did pick up in our literature review, you know, again, reemphasizing that these systems are not reliable, but there has definitely been picked up a bias for our non-native English language students. So be really careful if you are using these systems that there can be a lot of false positives. I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Tammy. And thank you to all of our panelists. Of course, this has been a robust conversation. And just as we predicted, we could continue this conversation for weeks. A couple of questions, though, that I did want to address from the chat. There are several conversations happening in the chat around policy development, whether in the handbook or the syllabus, institutional policy. And Courtney did post a link in the chat on the Council for Higher Education Accreditation, their guiding principles for AI in accreditation and recognition. I think that that particular statement or those guiding principles are a really good place to start with policy development. They're nice, they're high level, they're not super specific, which makes policy development from them a little bit more effective. We also had, let me see, I lost my chat here. There was another question here that I was actually, someone had asked whether or not we expected the ANA to have an updated position statement. And I will just say, of course, as AI continues to evolve and to become the unknown future that it will be, they probably will have to come up with an updated position statement. None of us are that closely involved with ANA. It just, you know, based on our collective knowledge, I think we all anticipate that there will be an updated position statement at some point. Okay. Another very interesting one, and I'm just going to throw this out to the panel, whoever wants to take it, feel free, which is, how do you feel about helping students learn about using AI to increase their productivity in advocating for patients? That could be a webinar in and of itself. So if anybody wants to tackle that one.
I can if you want.
Go right ahead.
Because that's kind of what I think I mentioned it before that I've been working on for advising sessions. And I feel like, you know, I don't want to be afraid to teach them these things and work with them. Not necessarily, you know, it's more guiding, it's facilitating, it's not teaching, but, you know, I don't want to avoid that because I'm afraid that they'll overuse it and then they won't be thinking or learning. You know, I'd rather get in there with them now because they're going to use it anyway. So, and they may not use it well. So I'd rather get in there and do the work with them now so that they develop good habits and I can guide them. Does that answer the question? I didn't see the
I
original
think so.
question.
Yeah, I think that that's a great discussion.
Yeah.
Courtney, I see that a lot of people are starting to leave and they're asking about the recording. That'll be sent out to the email that they registered with.
Yes,
right?
the email will be shared. The recording will be sent out to everyone that attended, anyone that registered. We will also share it on the OADN VSR website. So that will be available on the homepage as well. You will need to potentially create an account to log in, but you'll be able to access it without any issue.
And our next webinar, before a lot of you have to jump off, and then we can continue the conversation until we're all done here. Our next webinar is April 2nd at 1 o'clock Eastern time. And our topic for that one will be best practices for AI integration in simulation. Because we are a simulation committee, we tend to focus on simulation, but we always include content that is applicable to nurse educators across the continuum. So go ahead, Liz. I know you're about to weigh in on that.
I was just going to caveat on Tammy. Sometimes when we have conversations with our learner, we find creative ways they're using it, and we ask them to then share that with their peers. I mean, that's occurred throughout my practice as an educator with learners. Some of them are very creative for things that you don't think about. So it's nice that they feel comfortable vetting what they're doing with it, so we can kind of gauge it as an appropriate use of AI, and then ask them if they would be willing to take time to share that with their peers. Peer learning is a very strong process in our field of working with our students, and I try to encourage that because, and our, as nurses, we're all educators, and we try to get our learners to understand the importance of sharing their knowledge versus holding that knowledge. We're not a for-profit profession. So we really, it really, I tell you, it really boosts that learner that may be kind of shy, but is very creative. And I tell you, they just love being able to be validated and share what they know. So I applaud Tammy for having those 1 hour sessions, because I think that's a great stepping stone to be able to see what the peers are, what our learners are doing with AI. And it's okay to share.
So the other question real quick that we can address, it was, what safeguards can we put in place for ethical development of faculty scholarly work that use AI generators? And I know several of us have mentioned multiple times about it's okay to use AI. What I generally tell our faculty at Galen is, and I think it was Corinne who said it, you can use AI to generate your starting point, like a launching point. If you use it for any kind of content development, it's important that we cite it as a source. And then, as many of the chat conversations have gone, always check the output. I said in the chat, we're nurses. We know that you don't ever trust the machine. Don't ever assess your patient. Don't ever trust the machine, assess your output. Make sure that it's accurate, make sure that there's no hallucinations, make sure it's medically accurate, factually accurate, and all of the things. So I don't know if anyone else has anything else to add to that.
I do some peer review for a journal. And if you are submitting to any journal, take time to read what the requirement is for that journal in use of AI. And I don't know of any that are popular in, kind of the nurse educator realm of journals, including simulation, that does not now have some sort of statement in journals for article submissions about use of AI. And that's pretty much commonplace now. So check what that journal has, and then pull that into how you are doing scholarly work within your institution, because the journals give you a great guidance and starting point for that.
Yes, and just to kind of add on to that too, we have to always go back to our professional standards, because as we've already mentioned, there's really not a great way for it to be detected, the AI piece, but we have to remember our professional integrity. And did we use it to do our prompt, or did you take the exact scenario and put that in there and be very, very transparent? Because yes, it is a great tool. So maybe it did generate a great scenario, but then we need to be very transparent that the entire scenario was generated by the AI and we didn't change anything, but that we did review it. So it's the biggest piece that we can do is just keeping ourselves in line with our academic integrity and our professional standards.
All right, with that, we have 1 minute to spare. So Teresa, any parting words?
No, we just encourage you all to please sign up for part 2. Join us in leading the nurse educators for an exploration of AI's transformative potential in simulation-based learning. And we're going to focus on how artificial intelligence can enhance but not replace faculty expertise while maintaining alignment with healthcare standards of best practice. So that part 2 is going to be the ongoing discussion about ethical considerations. And then we're going to ask our participants to explore strategic approaches to integrating AI-generated case scenarios and addressing potential biases and ensuring that this experience aligns with our nursing competencies and best practices. So we hope that you'll join us on April 2nd. And we put the link in the chat box.
Thank you all so much.
Bye, everybody.